Thank you all for your patience with me. It has been a little while since I got one of these up, but I have about 5 really great interviews in the hopper that I'll be releasing every week from here on out. In this episode, it is a solo episode, and I do a deep dive into how I believe we should all be preparing for the future. Before we get there, as always, this episode is brought to you by our friends at Dreamfuel. They are the leader in mental performance for executives, founders, and sales teams across tech. They genuinely work with the best of the best. And as a wake-up call listener, you are eligible for a free one-to-one coaching session. So you can go to dreamfuel.com/wakeupcall to claim your session. Honestly, even one of these sessions, even that one free session, can have a huge impact on your focus, inspiration, and stress levels. And I have personally been having so much fun rolling up my sleeves at the Enfold Institute. It has given me an incredible amount of joy and meaning to see the personal transformations that happen at our intensives each and every week. If you're interested in psychedelics and how they might be able to help you really close that gap between who you are today and who you know you can become, please go check us out at enfold.org. We're already at about 75% capacity for the rest of the year, so don't wait too long if you are interested. But that's it, that's all. Let's get into the episode. Hello. All right. Well, I'm going to dive into it today. I have talked at length about this topic through my newsletter, but I realized I never really did a full deep dive on my thoughts on the podcast. So that's what I'm going to do today. And I am pulling largely from an essay I wrote called How to Prepare for the Next Decade. I wrote it on Substack, and it hit a cultural nerve. It has been viewed by over 300,000 humans already, which is crazy. And people are finding it helpful. People are finding it valuable. So I thought I would kind of break it down on this podcast for all the listeners, because it is long and maybe you prefer to listen rather than read a really long form article. But yeah, the premise is this idea that we're about to enter what I have coined and called the acceleration decade. I think that it is not an exaggeration to say that it will be one of the most destabilizing decades in human history, particularly on the psyche. And I think that this change will be rapid, it will be personalized, and it will be relentless. And I feel somewhat uniquely qualified to speak on this because, as many of you know, I went through my own personal acceleration decade. And I wouldn't say that ended super well. Maybe with enough time, and now I feel great, but I certainly ran my mind, body, soul, nervous system into the ground. And I did that because I lived my life on fast forward. In a 10-year span, I went from a business development rep at a small Vancouver-based startup to co-founding and building one of the hottest new venture capital funds on the planet. I optimized my entire life for acceleration and outcomes. And I believe on a grand scale, we're all about to embark on the same experiment, but not necessarily by choice. Mine was a self-imposed acceleration decade, but as a species, we are actively hitting the fast forward button. And our religion right now has become speed. And our God is immediate outcomes. We want everything to happen right away. And I don't care how fast you're able to learn or adapt to the change. I believe there is a fundamental problem with our biological makeup. And I learned that firsthand. Over my last decade, I did my best to turn myself into a machine. I learned fintech, then I learned broader software, then media, and then finally venture capital. And I was able to climb, very close to the top of at least 3 of those industries. But it required an immense amount of sacrifice, an insatiable drive for more, and an obsession with learning and optimizing. And I think most importantly, it required me to override my basic human needs, the needs of true connection, the need to process change, deal with emotions, find stillness. To me, those were bugs, like little hindrances that slowed me down from getting what I wanted. I found that if I kept myself suitably distracted or intoxicated, I could sort of medicate those bugs away. And it worked for a while until it didn't. And eventually the constant rapid change, the obsession with more, the feeling of being completely disconnected from myself caught up with me. And shared this, but I could not focus without a pill. I could not sleep without a different pill. I could not relax without a drink. And I could not process things without having a panic attack. I short-circuited my entire system by trying to keep up with the rapid pace. And my big fear is that over the next few years, stories like mine are going to become the rule, not the exception. And again, not by choice or desire either. You're going to be forced into this high-paced game just to simply keep up with the speed of change. The evolution of our mind and our nervous system is painstakingly slow. We are humans, and we're kind of stuck with this Mesolithic era V2 model of our nervous system because evolution can't catch up. And the cracks in that model are showing through increased anxiety, sleep disruption, attention fragmentation, addiction, loneliness, and it's already not a fair fight for the world we've created today, and it's just going to get worse. And so I want to talk through kind of my advice, and this isn't going to be about, how can you go about acquiring more over the next 10 years. Plenty of podcasts for that. But I think that the acceleration itself will take care of the more. There will be an abundance of more everywhere you look. More people shilling you ways to make more, more technology, more content, more things to buy, more news, more convenience, more things fighting for your attention, just more. So I've tried to use my lived experience and the time I've spent disconnected over the last year, disconnected from this system, to give you my best ideas on how to prepare yourself against this onslaught of more and this rapid pace that will continue. And to prepare so that you might, and this is a big might, find some peace, sanity, and meaning through the next 10 years. So the acceleration decade. Let's start there. What do I think is coming? And I won't pretend to be smart enough to know exactly what's going to happen. I'm not going to try and predict if it's a dystopian nightmare or we enter into the most beautiful utopian era ever. But what I do know now is that we are compressing time, and that's going to continue to accelerate. So if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, it does feel like time is compressing, you're not losing your mind. It literally is. And that's because essentially the job of all technology is to compress time. And I'm not talking about physics. I'm not talking about subjective experience of time. It's not that the actual hours are shorter, but the distance between desire and fulfillment is collapsing. And our nervous systems were just not built to handle that. And, a friend of mine, Richard Banfield of Second Harvest, put it super succinctly. Basically, technology's job is to shrink the time between what you want to happen to it actually happening. In sci-fi movies, we've always been obsessed with time travel. And it turns out humans have been time travelers since our very first inventions. To kind of bring this to light, you can take something as rudimentary as a small wooden raft that one of our ancestors used to float across a river. So in one reality, his clan could not risk the crossing, so they took 2 days to walk around the river. But in the new reality that they have a raft, they cross on that raft in 20 minutes. And so they just time traveled forward 1 day, 11 hours, and 40 minutes. And, since that raft, since the early inventions, we've kind of been obsessed with accelerating time since that. But for a long time, there were these barriers that helped us slow down that compression. They were pretty simple barriers. One was invention, and 2 was adoption. People had to actually invent the technology, which took time. And then people had to adopt the technology, which took even more time. And that extra time that invention and adoption gave humanity was used to adapt both ourselves and the society around us. And so by the time the next thing came along, we as humans, we felt collectively ready, But now invention is speeding up exponentially. There's no barrier, and adoption can be almost instantaneous, particularly with consumer AI. This buffer or integration zone is now gone. And so you can ask, why are they speeding up? And it's pretty simple. Invention speeds up in a number of different ways, but mainly through something called combinatorial innovation. The definition of combinatorial innovation is the process of creating new technologies, products, or processes by recombining existing components, knowledge, or technologies in novel ways. It posits that few technologies are created from nothing, but rather constructed from pre-existing parts. And this approach allows for a nearly infinite space of potential technological configurations. Oversimplification, but what that means is essentially steam power accelerated the invention of electricity. Electricity accelerated the invention of computing. The internet accelerated the invention of mobile. Mobile paired with the internet accelerated the invention of AI, and so on and so on. And now each wave combines to accelerate towards infinitely more variants that can then go on to combine even more and more. And you can see it gets out of hand pretty quickly. And then, adoption speeds up through distribution and education. take something like the agricultural revolution. It took thousands of years to spread. The printing press took over a century to make its way across Europe. So it's shortening. And then electrification of the US took around 40 years to reach most households. But then you look at something like ChatGPT, and it reached 100 million users in roughly 2 months. And the difference between those different periods of time is efficient distribution and education. We all have the world's greatest distribution device in our hands, and it can be in our hands instantaneously. But I think one of the more insidious things that technology is doing right now is, yes, it is saving us time, but then it is quietly turning around and spending that time for us. And it does this by expanding what we believe is now possible, and that then expands what is expected of us. So technology itself is a fast forward button, and the 2 pause buttons we had in the past have now become a 2x speed button and a 10x speed button. They're actually helping with the acceleration. So that is why we are entering this warp speed. That is why we're entering the acceleration decade. So, you might ask, what can we do to prepare ourselves? So I'm going to cover 10 ideas. 10 ideas that allowed me to return to a healthy baseline. A baseline where my mind, body, and soul feel calm, at peace, and inspired again. Because they didn't for a really long time. And I believe these same ideas are literally perfectly suited to help you navigate the future. And each idea, I'll explain a little exercise that will hopefully help you in your preparation. So 10 things we're going to cover. 1 is slowing down as a strategy. Number 2 is how to build depth and not just route skills. Number 3 is how to actually train your nervous system. Number 4, invest in real connection. Number 5, how to foster an anti-fragile identity. Number 6, how you can learn to separate signal from noise. Number 7, redefine your definition of success. Really important one. Number 8, analyze the trades that you're making every time you adopt a new piece of technology. Number 9, cultivate longer time horizons. Number 10, I'm going to talk about how we don't give in to cynicism. And then there is one bonus one that I think sort of trumps them all. But let's start with 1. Slowing down as a strategy. So I think we all know slowing down is good. It is needed. This one might feel like common sense, but it's so important right now. And I'll outline it with an example. If you were in a car that was going 100 miles per hour and accelerating more and more every minute, what would you do? You would probably try to slow down. But unfortunately, for many of us, this goes against everything we've been taught. Until now, the rewards went to those who were masters at compressing time. If you were able to delegate, automate, move faster than your competitors, then you would simply outcompete them. The modern world programmed us all for efficiency. That was the name of the game. And efficiency is the ability to achieve a desired result with the least possible waste of time, energy, or resources. The more output you get from the same or fewer inputs, the more efficient you are. The problem is that efficiency has become confused and almost synonymous with speed, but they are not the same thing. And I had to relearn this, going back to the car example. If your desired output is to make a right turn and you're already going 100 miles per hour, then increasing your speed is not the answer. The most efficient way to get to your desired output is to decelerate so you can identify the exit, change lanes, and then execute that turn safely. And so what I'm saying is the environment we will all be in and are already in is going to have the acceleration covered for us. So your job now will be to know when to decelerate so that you can actually see where you're going clearly and make those crucial adjustments and arrive safely at whatever outcome you desire. So for this one, something that helped me, this is, the little exercise is for the next month, find one afternoon in your busy schedule that you can carve out. Do not schedule anything and let your immediate family know that you will be practicing silence and you would appreciate not being disturbed. If needed and it's too chaotic at home, go to a different environment. And for 6 hours, do not speak to anyone. Do not write anything. Do not read anything. Do not go and make this a thinking session. Let thoughts come and go as they will, but without attachment. No technology whatsoever. What you're trying to do is not consume anything at all through any of your senses. There is nothing to do. There is nowhere to be. And you will find that some answers to the big questions or decisions you've been thinking about will slowly start to arise. And if they don't, that's okay. You're building this new skill, this slowing down, and you're going to learn how to just be. And like any skill, it will take time to foster. But I do think this afternoon will become your edge. It has for me. I actually practice a full day of silence almost every week now. And it is by far my most productive day. It might not look like it from outputs, but the way at which I can think and problem solve and just feel calm is crazy. So try it. On to number 2. Build depth, not route skills. What do I mean by that? Again, this one kind of goes against what we were taught would make us successful in the modern world. The modern world told us all, go learn one skill, become really good at that skill, and that's the path to success. Niche down, focus all your efforts in one area. All of this advice has become irrelevant in my eyes. What happens when the skill you spent your life learning can now be done at 80% proficiency by a novice in a matter of minutes. And we're already there across most disciplines. AI, robotics, will continue their trend line and eventually flatten all surface level skills. So the skills that will matter in the future will be things like judgment, taste, the ability to make connections across disciplines, storytelling, moral and ethical reasoning. And, going back to the car example, the skills you will need will more closely mirror a navigator than that of the actual driver. Taste, judgment, cross-disciplinary connections, storytelling, moral reasoning. are all much harder to foster. These things take time, and they require life experience. They require failures. They require interest in many different areas. And I believe a lot of time spent in quiet contemplation. Humanity, in large part, has lost contemplation in favor of science and answers. It will require you to understand how you actually view the world and what you stand for and who you are. And that takes time to figure out. So what I would suggest, and something I've been doing a lot of, helped me, again, this is the exercise part, is choose one big question. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be something like, what is success? What does power mean to me? What is a meaningful life? Think big questions. And then for the next 14 days, explore that question deeply through various lenses. Look at it from the lens of philosophy, science, history, and your own, this is most important, like your own personal experience. Read from a wide variety of sources. It is okay to use AI, but make that only part of your curation. I strongly encourage you to not use that as your only gateway to information. I do my best to actually go find the book or read the newsletter. This curation by one single system is a problem. Number 3, arguably the most important, I think I'll probably say that with all of them, but is how to train your nervous system. This is how we fight back. And I think focusing on your nervous system felt like almost a luxury in the past. It was something you did if you had time to alleviate stress, and it would, slightly improve the quality of your life. But for me, and like many others, it's, usually priority number 10 or 12 on the list. I think this has to become priority number 1 for all of us. Because when you reach a certain level of velocity, as we all will be forced into, it becomes a necessity. And again, take it from me, who at one point had a therapist, a spiritual advisor, and a coach all at once, just to try to keep the train on the tracks and regulate my nervous system so that I could continue to function. Because there is no escaping the havoc that speed and pace of change will have on our nervous systems. I do feel like we're lucky, though, that our ancestors grew up in an environment where they had time to go inward. They had time to understand themselves. And they had time to build and teach timeless practices that actually nourish our souls and our nervous systems. So I think that's where the answer lies. And we must adopt these ancient practices with some serious urgency. Things like meditation, silence, solitude, yoga, long walks, sweating, sleep discipline, nature, disconnection, contemplation, healthy debate and discourse. And all of them sound simple, but these practices will require more and more discipline as this acceleration continues. Because everywhere you look, there will be solutions, synthetic solutions to the increasing feeling of overwhelm, anxiety, and this fear that you're falling behind. And it's going to come in a lot of forms. It will be one-to-one customized entertainment, new social distraction apps, pills, shots, bio devices. Everything out there is going to tell you it is the solution. And everything's also going to tell you that there's something wrong with you. And it's not the environment, that it's somehow you that needs to be fixed and not society. So we must take care of ourselves. And we cannot fall into the trap that fixing ourselves is all that is needed. The solutions are not only on an individual level. We do need folks to get involved in their corner of the world to improve these systems that are causing much of this stress on the nervous system, improve our systems for community design, regulation and guardrails around tech, education that focuses on being, not just doing, and building institutions that are like worth trusting again. I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. But a rule of thumb that I've come to really learn is that everything you need to control your nervous system is free and available to you at any time. And the only cost to you is your time. Everything else, all those other synthetic solutions, they're a parlor trick. You can do it yourself. And so what I do and what I encourage others as the exercise for this one is you must build a daily 1-hour practice that encompasses movement, stillness, breath, and solitude. And you have to guard that as if your life depends on it, because I believe it really does. So that's what you do to train your nervous system. And then the second that is also going to help your nervous system, because we are social animals, we live in relation to one another, is get involved in one social impact initiative within your community. Purpose has actually been shown it can change how your body interprets stress. So find something, doesn't matter what it is, means something to you, go get involved. Which brings us to 4. Invest in real connection. I definitely don't want to sound, dismissive of online connection or community. I think for many, that can be a much needed lifeline. Those relationships can certainly be real and meaningful, but I do not believe that they're sufficient on their own. It can be dangerous to mistake broad connection for deep connection. And I think the danger of making that mistake is just going to be amplified. So there will continue to be mass layoffs across every sector of the economy. That's going to happen. This whole idea of new jobs will be created just as fast is just not true, in my opinion, at least in the short term. For the jobs as we know them today, we will not need as many humans in the loop to get the same outputs. Kind of just full stop. Maybe in the medium to longer term, new jobs will be created, but there's going to be a lot of shifts. I think work and employment as we know it has changed forever. I don't think we're going back. And what I think will happen is that more people will be forced into entrepreneurship, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. For much of human history, commerce was done this way. You were a blacksmith and you ran your own business, or you were a shopkeeper and ran your own business. Like, we've been doing it a long time. But as a byproduct of this, there will be tens, maybe hundreds of millions of people who now simultaneously have to promote, market, and sell their goods and services. And they will not have a big marketing or advertising budget like corporations do. So where are they going to turn? They'll turn to social media. And I think we've been in the consumption era of social media, and we're about to enter the creation area. And not necessarily as a creative outlet, but more as a means of survival. And I think competition is going to become brutal. It's going to become pretty ruthless. And supply of content will go way up. But the consumption demand is going to stay roughly the same. The stats are already insane. People can't consume anymore. And maybe even that declines slightly as more people understand the impact that consumption of social media has on their mental health. So the more time that we spend on these social media platforms, the larger our social footprint and our sort of web of connectivity grows. And I have learned from my own journey that we're just not meant to manage hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of relationships. It is incredibly taxing and incredibly exhausting. And to keep up with that extra demand, we have to pull that energy from somewhere. And more often than not, we pull that energy away from the real connections in our lives. The connections with true close friends, loved ones, family. Super shitty to say, but I saw this firsthand, as my community or following through the fund and outreach and all this stuff on LinkedIn and other platforms grew. I gave my time and attention to tens of thousands of connections, yet I barely had time to call my mom back, And yeah, so what I have started doing again, and an exercise I would encourage everyone to do, is curate a list of 10 people that you really enjoy having in your life. And then set a reminder, an alarm on your phone for a time that's usually not that busy. For me, it's around 4 p.m. And then each day when that alarm goes off, reach out to one of those 10 people. Small, short, it can be a call, it can be a message, a voice note, anything. And that just keeps your people close. And then on the flip side, so that's about creating connection. And then the other side is boundaries. And so I would also encourage you to set 3 healthy boundaries for the rest of the relationships that you manage in your life. So whether that's deleting social apps from your phone, setting out a dedicated time or day to engage with that broader network so you don't feel like, you're falling behind. And, could even be no email, iMessage, WhatsApp after 8 p.m. Find 3 boundaries, set them, stick with them. Number 5, fostering an anti-fragile identity. This is a big one. And actually did an earlier episode, I think it's episode 17 with Chris Walker, where we talked quite a bit about identity. But this idea pulls from Nassim Taleb's Thoughts and Ideas. It's a great book. It's called Anti-Fragile, Things That Gain from Disorder. And so career and work as we know it will become completely nonlinear. Not like linear in the past where it was you get promoted down this way and you follow this career, entire industries and sectors of the economy are going to be reorganized again and again. And most of the roles we know now will disappear. Yes, new roles will be created, but they'll emerge quickly and then disappear just as fast. And so many of us have our identities overly wrapped up in our career. I know I did. I was tech guy, VC guy, sales guy. And when that was no longer the case, it really did feel like a part of me died. And it was very disorienting. Luckily, I had the time and the space to examine that identity, to grieve that identity, and to start to build a new one. And not everyone will be so lucky in the future. So I think we have to get ahead of it and start to decouple your identity from work now. If your identity is, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a real estate agent, I'm a marketer, I'm a salesperson, I think you will experience a lot of suffering. I think a safer thing to do is shift towards a new identity that goes beyond the roles that you play in society. Example would be an identity of I am someone who can learn, adapt, and thrive in new environments. Or to borrow from my guy Ram Dass, I am loving awareness. It's a strong identity. It is an anti-fragile identity. And so Nassim defines anti-fragility as systems that benefit from disorder. So if your identity is something like I thrive in new environments, then you actually benefit from change. So you have to do this work yourself, but you will want to build an identity that strengthens under the pressure of constant change and, frankly, chaos. And then maybe the step after is play around with the feeling of no identity. What if you did not need a label at all? That just being is enough. And that in every present moment, you decide through your actions who you want to be. That's a powerful place to get to. So what I would suggest, a little exercise for this one, is write down your top 5 identity labels. Founder, investor, writer, athlete, father, mother, whatever they are. Write them all down. Now cross them all out. And if all of those disappeared tomorrow, who would you still be? And sit with that. And let your new identity unfold or dissolve from there. On to number 6. Learn to separate signal from noise. As Yuval Noah Harari, author of Sapiens, said, in a world deluged by irrelevant information, clarity is power. And we're seeing it. The explosion of AI-generated content, news, synthetic media, infinite opinions, and infinite ways to optimize it has already begun. I'm sure you're feeling the wave when you go online, but it is just the tip of the iceberg. The content storm is going to get incredibly good at customizing exactly what you see. You're going to see things different than me based on your fears and desires. And those are going to be manipulated, not because everyone is evil, but because we live in a capitalistic society and they want you to spend money. And the easiest way to do that is to manipulate your fears and desires to get you to take action. And ads, videos, newsletters, interactive books, they're going to be customized at a one-to-one level, meaning that something is going to be generated just for you based on everything the internet knows about you. And so you're going to have to get really, really good at navigating your ship through this storm, this deluge of information. So what I would suggest, an exercise, is do a little bit of an audit and list everything that you consumed in the last 48 hours. Takes a little bit of time. It's kind of annoying, but it's worth it. And it's kind of shocking when you do. So this is everything. Think podcasts you've consumed, group chats you've talked in, communities you've showed up in, newsletters, social media posts, TV shows, movies, everything. And once you have that list, for each item, ask 3 questions. 1, did this change my thinking in a durable and positive way? Number 2, how did this influence me? Will I still remember this in 30 days? Number 3, did this alter a decision I made for the better? Go through all of them, ask those 3 questions. And if the answer is no to 1, 2, or all 3, it was just noise. And then once you know it's noise, begin to ruthlessly curate what you consume. And be ruthless, because life is short. Spending it on bullshit. Your attention is your greatest asset right now. And that's what everyone wants. So make sure you pay yourself first. Number 7 is redefine your definition of success. And again, this list is my guess. I don't claim to have all the answers. My best guess at what will prepare a person to be successful over the next chapter of humanity. But I will say over the last, year or so, I have refined and redefined what success means to me. And I would encourage everyone else to do the same. And if you don't, you may, like me, unconsciously shoot for a target that you don't even want. And you only find that out years and years later. My original definition of success I made when I was very young. And it was money, it was status, and it was the admiration of others. Obviously, in my head, I didn't tell myself that that's what it was. But if I'm honest, those became my North Stars. And I lied to myself along the way about meaning, but in truth, that's what I wanted. And I did achieve all of those things, and they did not work for me. I was not any more content, happy, or fulfilled. And so after a lot of personal inquisition, my loose definition of success has become the following. I want to be someone who feels deeply connected to themselves and the world around them, who has enough peace and equanimity in their daily life to seek truth and to express that truth. A person who has the courage to take action to help create a better future for all, and someone who chooses love over fear as often as they can. That is my definition. It does not have to be yours. Do the hard work of figuring that out. But inherently in this list that I'm running through, you'll see my bias towards that type of success show up. So if that's not what you're aiming for, that's okay. But that's what I'm aiming at. And this list is, anytime I write or speak, it's for myself as much as others. So that's what this is going to optimize for. And I'm not here to judge anyone's definition of success. I think over this same time period, we will see a level of monetary and status success that we can't fully comprehend yet. I think we're starting to see it with like the trillionaires. And, even if you're like me and those games, the money and status games, have lost some of their allure for you right now, they may come back into style, into vogue in a big way, because soon what they will unlock will be the things of science fiction, things that we couldn't even imagine. What happens in a world where if you reach a certain level of wealth or status, you extend your lifespan. You can live to 150. What happens when money can ensure that your children don't have a single disease? What happens when a certain level of status allows you to live out your wildest fantasies, every single day? And what happens when you can literally use money to erase every single feeling of pain and discomfort from your life? It's human nature to want all those things. We don't want our children to suffer. We don't want to be in pain. And just like we are right now, where we'd be sold on the idea that without those things, life is somehow meaningless, and that the never-ending pursuit of more cycle is going to begin again. And it sounds insane to even write, but there will likely come a point in our lifetime where we will have to decide whether sacrificing our present reality in order to achieve enough money to live another 50 or 60 years is worth it. Years will be up for purchase. And you'll have to decide if that fits within your personal definition of success. But only you can decide that. But you do have to make the decision consciously, or the algorithms will come up with an answer for you. And exercise has been helpful for me, that might be helpful for you, is take out a notebook and finish a sentence. And the sentence is, I will feel successful when. Whatever that is. Go deep. And then for everything that you write down, ask yourself, who taught me this mattered? Was it your younger self? Was it the education system? Was it your parents? Was it social media? And then imagine you're 80 years old and you're about to die. And you can only keep 3 metrics of success from your current definition. Which 3 really mattered? And which feel empty when you approach it from that frame? Then write those down and build your new definition of success around those. Guess that leads us to 8. Another really important one that I didn't realize. But number 8 is analyze the trades you're making. And many of us might remember the movie Click. Such a sad movie at the end. But if you remember, it was the one with Adam Sandler, who has been given a remote that allowed him to fast forward parts of his life. And naturally, he fast forwarded through all the perceived inconveniences and painful parts of his life until he ends up in a future that he does not recognize or want. And it turns out that movie was far ahead of its time. Because if he was consciously aware of the trades he was making by using that remote, would he have still used it? Probably not. So as I talked about earlier, technology allows us to fast forward through these perceived inconveniences in our lives and fast forward through the pain to get right to the outcome we want. But these trades are not free. They all come at a cost. Every time we blindly adopt a new technology, we are outsourcing a part of our mental or physical ability. over time, that ability atrophies rapidly. These are abilities that have taken 300,000 years of human evolution to form. And they can be decimated in a single lifetime. And so you have to understand which abilities you're comfortable trading. There's already early evidence that artificial intelligence is lowering our IQ. It came out of MIT Media Labs that released a report that said excessive reliance on AI-driven solutions may contribute to cognitive atrophy and the shrinking of our critical thinking abilities. Now, that's pretty fucking important. And, caveat, small study, yes. Yet to be peer reviewed, yes. But it feels pretty directionally accurate, particularly when you look at historical examples. And that means that we are trading our ability to critically and creatively think just for access to outcomes and answers faster. I mean, it's only been 4 years with a fairly rudimentary version of AI. What happens in another 10 of us making that trade? So just cultivating awareness around the sacrifices that we are making is going to be critical if you want to maintain some levels of both cognitive and physical function. And so an exercise that helps is pick 5 core technologies that you use daily and just monitor them for 7 days. And then for each one, fill out a grid with column A and column B. Column A is what does this give me? Column B is what is it quietly costing me? And an example is you could do Google Maps. Well, what does this give me? This gives me the ability to figure out how to get to the new grocery store. What is it quietly costing me? Well, if you're anything like me who relies way too much on Google Maps, I don't know any street roads and I'm pretty terrible at direction skills, getting places. So what it cost me over the 8 years of using Google Maps is now I'm addicted to it. Now I need to use it. And so after that week, ask yourself 2 questions. If this technology disappeared tomorrow, what would I regain? And then does the benefit outweigh the internal cost for the life I want? Think about it for yourself, for your family. I think these are really important things that we have to pay attention to. Number 9, we're getting there. Thanks for hanging with me. Number 9 is cultivate longer time horizons. Talked a bit about it. Instant outcomes. Our personal innovations cycles are tightening. Feedback loops become immediate. This time between thinking I want and I now have is disappearing. You're going to have a thought, and that thought will become reality faster than you can imagine. That's what's happening. But many of our thoughts are based on impulse, habit loops, conditioning, rather than true conscious intention. I've witnessed this with my own brain and my own thoughts, particularly in Vipassana when I was meditating 10 hours a day. You see how much your thoughts are not actually your thoughts, influenced by your environment around you. And this period of time between having a thought and then not immediately being able to get what you want, I think is a good thing. It kept us from straying too far away from our North Star. It just gave us this buffer. So soon it'll be easier than ever to get way off track really quickly, off track from the life that you intended to build, because acceleration rewards reaction. But when you look at true evolution, it rewards patience. And this is why thinking in terms of decades rather than days, weeks, or months, or even years will be a competitive moat for building a life of meaning. And it would also ensure that even with these longer time horizons, you're not getting overly attached to the outcome. Always focus on process, feeling, and intention. And an exercise that helps with this is pick one project that will take a minimum of a decade to actualize. I know that sounds crazy, but it could be building a body of meaningful writing. It could be mastering a domain of interest of yours, piano. It could be raising children with intention, spiritual development, like things that just take a long time, and commit to it. And then another one is, we don't often think of death, but death is a good way to look at longer time horizons. And write your obituary. And then ask yourself through that lens, what am I doing right now that version of me will find trivial? Deathbed version. And what am I neglecting that version would care deeply about? Play around with those. Pick a project. Play around with those journaling prompts. Brings us to 10. Sort of the final one, because there's a bonus one. Number 10 is do not give in to cynicism. You don't see a lot of hope out there. And candidly, I guess if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, you could probably hear it in my voice, but I kind of lost hope 9 months ago. And after the initial excitement of, leaving my old life behind sort of faded, and I started to really think about the state of the world, the role I wanted to play, what impact I wanted to have, and who I wanted to serve. Before that, I'd basically, tuned out the entire world in order to focus on my own personal development for months. But you can only do that so long until you get called to sort of examine the state of humanity. Again, we're relational creatures. So I'm talking really dive into it all. I wanted to understand world events better, why they were happening, what technology was impacting lives, where we're headed. As you can see, I've thought about all this shit way too much. That's why I'm doing a whole podcast about it. But I did all that and it looked really fucking bleak. It sucked. It wasn't fun. And that kind of put me into a pretty big funk for a while. You look at the increase in global conflicts, the world order being rearranged, the rapid advancement of technology that we don't understand, our leaders across the board letting us down again and again, our dying planet, humans seemingly playing God through bioengineering, potential for synthetic pathogens, the erosion of institutional trust on a massive scale, and then the crisis of meaning that I talk about all the time. It's like a lot to take in when you really are present for it and start lifting up rocks. And so my initial reaction was, maybe I'll just stay lost forever. Maybe I'll just hang out and go for forever. Just opt out of it all. Focus on my immediate friends and family and ride it out in some cabin in the woods. Just put my head in the sand. But as I sat with it, I realized I think that's exactly how we got here. That has kind of been what society's reaction has been. That this all just feels too overwhelming. And so we all agreed to just put our head in the sand and pretend everything is fine when it's not. And that reaction happens when people lose hope. And we must not lose hope. I have come to understand that's so important. We must not lose hope in the good of the world. We must not lose hope that new leaders will emerge. We must not lose hope that what we do, each of us matters, you know. We must not lose hope that we can wield these new technologies responsibly. We must not lose hope that we can save our planet. And we must not lose hope that love will beat back fear, as it always has before. And I think we all have to spread hope in our little part of the world, however big or however small. But that requires action. And so spreading hope is a really, really big thing that we can do right now. And the exercise to hopefully foster some hope and not give in to the cynicism and the hopelessness is write 2 letters to yourself. And the first one starts with, if the next 10 years go really, really badly, ... Go into detail, write it all out. If worst case scenario happens, what happens? And that's going to showcase the floor of how bad it could get. But in doing so, you're also going to highlight the agency that you have in not making those realities come to pass. And once you're done that, write a letter dated 2036 to your present self and begin with, you were really worried about the future, but here's what you didn't see coming. And then list all of the incredible things that came to pass, that could come to pass, that might come to pass, that can come to pass, that you didn't expect. And I hope that brings some hope back. Now, number 11, this is the bonus one. And I will warn people that I use the big G word here, the big God word. If that word doesn't work for you, just swap it out. You can swap it out with truth, love, reality, the deepest layer of being, source, whatever works for you. Number 11 is look for God. Because we all worship something. We all have a God, whether we give it that name or not. There's this quote I love, and it says, attention, taken to its highest degree, is the same thing as prayer. And so where does the vast majority of your attention flow? Because that's what you're praying to every day. Whatever that thing is, whatever you give the vast majority of your attention to, that is your God. And for many of us, if we're honest, we spend an overwhelming amount of our waking hours, our energy and attention trying to accumulate money and raise our status within society. And the West has become an increasingly non-religious society, but that does not mean we do not have a God. I would argue our God has become money and status, and we worship that God every day with our attention. I'm not here to pass judgment or tell you what God to follow. But what I would urge you is to look for yourself at what you truly worship so you can see it. And when I say look for God, I don't mean like a theological or metaphysical sense. Again, I don't care what religion you follow, what belief system you have, what doctrine you ascribe to. My view is that many of the religions, almost all of them, are trying to point to the same thing. And I'll paraphrase Aldous Huxley's perennial philosophy. Essentially, it is, there is a divine ground of being. The true self is not the ego, and the goal is realization, not belief. And put another way, there is a ultimate divine reality underlying the world. The human being, the human soul is capable of directly knowing it, being in touch with it. It is it. And the purpose of life is to realize that union, your connection to yourself and to everything around you. And I very intentionally use the phrase, look for God, rather than find God or believe in God. I do not claim to know exactly what the divine reality underlying the world is, and nor will I likely ever come close to grasping it. My understanding will evolve, my beliefs will shift, but in the act of looking or seeking, that has actually found and brought me some peace. And I believe that if you start looking, you will be able to find some peace as well. And almost everyone I have met on this crazy journey that is also on the path of seeking, they come to a very similar conclusion. And that conclusion is that we are all one. And when you begin to embody that idea, when you start to circle around that conclusion, a natural personal transformation follows with a renewed focus on compassion, humility, love, selflessness, and more of that is what you really need to prepare for the next decade. It's what you need. It's what I need. It's what humanity needs. And that utopian future is possible. But I think it kind of has to start there. Thanks for hanging out with me. I know that was long. I hope it was valuable. And again, I do not have the answers. I'm just thinking about them. And I hope some of it is valuable. And of course, the counter argument here is that humans have always panicked when a new technology is released. The printing press, the factory, the internet, each of those felt massively destabilizing, but eventually went on to improve the quality of life for billions. The acceleration decade will also cure diseases, lift people out of poverty, expand education, and unlock an immense amount of creativity. I'm not worried about the upside. It's the pace that I'm worried about. So I hope those exercises bring you some peace, contentment, and equanimity through that pace, especially when things start getting shakier. I still have to remind myself of these things every single day. And I can come back to this podcast anytime when things feel unstable or you need a gentle reminder. There is also a written version of this on my Substack that you can check out. It's got the exercises there. But buckle up. It's going to get weird. But I have hope that the future will be beautiful because you and I get to consciously create it together. Thanks for listening. See y'all next week.